5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Wednesday morning. We are doing a little thing different right now, and kind of have to, because what we're about to do now is an educational program, because we are going to play the entire speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as it was delivered 50 years ago today. And the reason it needs to be identified as an instructional opportunity is because the speech is copyrighted, and the only way that it is permitted to be broadcast is if it is identified as an instructional piece and without any commercial interruptions or commercial adjacencies, which is why you did not hear a commercial before the speech, which, in other words, there'll be no commercial between the time I'm speaking right now and the time the speech comes on, nor will there be a commercial after the speech. But I would like to have your phone calls. I believe this is one of the it's clearly one of the most historical speeches that have been made in my lifetime. Clearly, the changes that have happened because of the dream, the Dr. Martin Luther King dream, which was shared by so many people in America, not just black Americans, by the way, but by many Americans, both black and white. Obviously, there was opposition to it, which it was the growing pains, I guess you could say, to try to make it light. The speech, so clearly an important one, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had the foresight to copyright the thing. He sent a copy of the address to the U.S. Copyright Office, and he listed the remarks as a work not reproduced for sale. And in legal terms, not that I'm an attorney, but I am reading from the Washington Post article on the legality of performing or broadcasting the speech. It says here, in legal terms, this is known as an unpublished work. Dr. King subsequently sued to enjoin two publishers from distributing phonographic reproductions of the address. One of the defendants was 20th Century Fox. They had filmed the broadcast 50 years ago of all the speeches, by the way, especially the speech at the March on Washington at the request of the march's organizers. And from that material, it had reproduced the phonographs, records that were the subject of the injunction. But a court ruled that although Dr. King had addressed a large public audience in an unrestricted public forum, reproduction without authorization was an infringement of King's copyright performance of the speech. Like the performance of a song or a play in a public space, for example, did not create a general waiver of King's right to limit reproduction under the Copyright Act of 1909. Very interesting stuff, right? And I promise I'll get to the speech in just a second. But since 1963, which is when the speech was given on this date, August 28th, 1963, Dr. King, and posthumously, am I saying that word right, Robin? After his death, his estate have strictly enforced control over use of the speech and Dr. King's likeness. And it goes on and on and on. Lots of lawsuits. Even the King estate suing CBS and USA Today for their use of the speech. They, however, do make arrangements for educational purposes, and I think today qualifies, being the 50th anniversary. In an important case just 7 years ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit found that a biographer of the Grateful Dead had made fair use of copyrighted concert posters and tickets, and that precedence is what led to the permission to broadcast Dr. King's speech, believe it or not. The Grateful Dead, of all things.
Something?
So the rules are strict. I want to be sure to abide by them, but I also, to me, it's more important to play the thing, because what he says in the speech, I mean, everybody remembers the I Have a Dream part. And maybe even a little bit more than that. But I have the entire speech. It's only, believe it or not, only 10 minutes and 48 seconds long.
Wow.
I don't think there's anything in here that's been edited out at all. So here it is. For 10 minutes and 48 seconds, you will hear the speech that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave in Washington, D.C. 50 years ago today. I don't know how many people were in his audience that day, but it's huge. I'm sure somebody has a number somewhere, but just look at that video. You'll see it was huge. Okay, well, here it is, and hopefully you were made aware of the fact that I was going to do this earlier this morning when I announced it, and you're ready to hear it, and I will shut up and let the words of Dr. Martin Luther King take us for the next 10 minutes and 48 seconds. Let me just make sure I did this right. I don't want to do the wrong thing here, Robin. All right, here, I think I got it right. Here we go.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. "50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, Negro is still languid in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, my country tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
There's the entire speech from Dr. Martin Luther King 50 years ago today. And for the rest of this 20, not even 20, but like 9 minutes now, we invite you to call in to tell us maybe what you were doing 50 years ago today, maybe how this has changed your life, how you feel it has changed the world. At 3 o'clock today is when former Presidents Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton will join President Obama and address a crowd at the ceremony that they're holding in Washington, D.C., which includes bell ringing. And of course, it's to recognize the importance of that speech. 50 years ago today, I was an 8-year-old kid up in New York and totally unaware of the significance of that speech. And whether it was brought up in my classroom by my teacher, I really couldn't tell you. I don't remember at all. But I'm going to tell you this, and it occurred to me as Robin and I were listening to the speech, sitting here in our new studio at the Paddock Mall, where we can view people entering into this mall, that when I first moved to Ocala, the land that this mall now sits on just looked like a hill. I can remember when I was a student at Central Florida Community College right across the street, sitting in that parking lot, having heard a rumor that they were going to build a mall here. Mm-hmm. And it was just a hill. And here is the connection with the speech. As we sit on that hill now, we do see the little black children walking with the little white children.
Yes, we do.
It is the dream come true, and I know we've got a long way to go, but that is absolutely what's happening. He's talking about black children, white children being able to run up and down the same hill, same time, with the same freedoms, and it is happening right outside this window, even as that speech was given. There is a speaker outside the wall here, for those of you who've not been here, and they were looking around. They could hear the speech as it was just being played, and again, just for the Copyright Office's sake, I did that for educational purposes, and hopefully you got something out of it. If you'd like to call him and comment, you are invited to. The number is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline. I know I do have somebody on the line. Good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning. First of all, let me thank you for playing that, and also say that we need continued dialogue in regards to the content, the total content of that speech. I can remember I was 11 years old. I was living in St. Augustine, Florida. We experienced some horrific things over there. I can remember when Dr. King was in St. Augustine and jailed in St. Augustine and treated very awful. I can remember some horrific things that happened to me. While things have changed, a lot remain the same. There is still a big disparity among the incomes of minorities and majorities. There still remains an inordinate amount of unemployment among minorities. As a matter of fact, it's double that of majorities in this country. Those are issues that we don't want to admit sometimes, but that's the reality of what's happening. There's still a large number of young kids, and his thing was not just to improve the rights of just minorities. Because if I am a believer that if you improve the status of minorities, you also improve the status of majorities.
Yeah, I think so too.
I've been lucky throughout my life because I've always worked with whites, and blacks, and Hispanics. Matter of fact, I have had the opportunity that many people don't have, that I'm sure you all have not had. I've lived among with whites, so I know probably I can say without any nullification of this, I would know more because I've lived with whites. I know more about whites than you do about blacks, simply because of the fact that we've lived in the same rooms and those types of things. So that is to say that I probably, throughout my life, have worked to do more to help blacks as well as whites than a lot of people. I've done thousands of volunteer hours. I walk the walk, and so I can talk the talk. But what I will say is that we need continued dialogue in order to prove this status of all Americans. And it's not going to happen by sitting back denying what's going on. What's happening today in regards to voting rights, in regards to the amount of poverty that we have among poor people in this country, and I mean working poor people, and people wanting to deny people, immigrants, the rights to become citizens, and this voter suppression and all this stuff, and people don't see it the way I do, and I don't care about that. What I do care about is trying to make sure that people are allowed for the dialogue so that they can be educated if they want to be educated. There's a difference between being ignorant and stupid and ignorant. And so we have to, if a person's just ignorant, they can be educated. A person want to be stupid and ignorant. That's sort of a lost cause.
I think sometimes policy, as in law, is slow. Human behavior happens first and then policy follows. I think our generation, Lenny, is still in charge, but that's not going to be much longer. And I think maybe when the next generation gets there, that's when the big wave of improvements will be seen.
But we still have to work on it, and we have to begin with.
Well, I'm not debating that. And your statement that you know whites better than I know blacks is probably accurate. I mean, there's no way to measure that. But
I say that because I've lived. That's the only reason I.
Well, I've worked pretty closely with a lot of black folks,
and
so
I have too.
But I wouldn't question it.
That's different than living with somebody.
But here's
getting up in the mornings and.
But here's my thinking on the subject: is that it's always been for me getting to know the person. Simple as that. If I have had any like reluctance around somebody who was different for any reason, because they were older, because they were a different color, because they spoke with a funny accent or even a different language, whatever my preconceived notion was of that person was usually never reinforced by them. Usually they turn out to be just plain old nice people, and you get along, and the more time you spend with them, as you just described yourself, I think colorblindness in this regard happens because you become familiar, and because of that, on a big scale, on a cultural scale, I think that's where I know entertainment seems like the more frivolous of the things that we have, but I think sometimes TV shows, sports, music, the fact that we have people of all colors and religions participating in those things helps open our eyes a little bit, I think.
I totally agree with that. And not only that, but one of the things that I would say is, and I think it gets kind of misinterpreted sometimes, you don't have to be colorblind. As a matter of fact, I think you should appreciate people's culture and color. And I think that's the enlightening part of it. It's not a matter of being colorblind, it's a matter of being appreciative of the differences and understanding the differences. That's where
So you want to borrow my Carpenter's records? It's just a joke. It's a joke. No, I think you're right. I appreciate you calling in, Lenny. The speech, I was so unsure of whether to play it or not until I found that one paragraph because of the copyright laws. Then I found that one paragraph where we are allowed to do it as an educational thing. So
let me say one little quick thing, and then I'll hang up because I know I don't want to dominate the whole thing. Mr. Hawk, I knew Mr. Hawk years ago, and one thing I can appreciate about Bob Hawk. He allowed, and a lot of people, I don't even know, a lot of your listeners don't realize this, but when I was president, when I was involved with the NAACP, he actually let us use his station to do radio telethons for a whole day on Saturdays a couple of years, and I will always be appreciative of him for that. And I would hope that the owners that you have now be more sensitive to issues of race and those types of things. If they were half as sensitive as Mr. Hawk was years ago.
Oh, I'm sure that they wouldn't have allowed me to play that if they weren't.
But this guy, and he doesn't, brag about it, or you never hear him say, but
right.
that I can appreciate Bob Hawk.
Well, there you go. It's nice to say that. And I think Vernon Arnett too at the other station across town. Yeah.
Yeah, because the NAACP.
I think so. I know Mr. Kirk did. I did a program on WMOP.
Right. That's right. Yeah, the three guys
with Jim Kirk. So I go back, like I say, a long ways. Anybody that know me can tell you I've spent thousands of volunteer hours on all kind of boards and everything else in Marion County, and I can tell you we still, until we continue to do stuff like that and not deny reality and come up with all these bogus things that I hear many politicians say nowadays, until we begin, this is something that we all, in order to make our society better, we all have to pitch in. And that's why I enjoy what you do a lot of times. I don't think people know the things that you do, and believe you me, it's appreciated. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lenny. Appreciate that. All right. Well, that will conclude our little half hour that we wanted to focus on the speech of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 50 years ago. If you're watching the news, keeping up with this. By the way, the speech didn't just affect America. Today, the bells will be ringing in America as they will in Switzerland and in Japan.
Nice.
Just so you know. All right, we'll take a little break and we'll be right back. Fun with Joe in about 12 minutes.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
Habitat for Humanity of Marion County is a ministry dedicated to improving lives by providing affordable and decent housing. Help them help others by visiting the Habitat for Humanity Ocala home store on Northwest 27th Avenue to schedule a